that revision, maybe not the title revisionist history, but revision and reassessment is a natural part of the discipline, right? So revision is important. Okay, so that concludes sort of the positive aspects of revisionist history. What I want to do now is look into the negative aspects, quote unquote, the negative aspects of revisionist history. Alright, so as a method of excusing or justifying injustice, right? You can use revisionist history to excuse or justify injustice. And I'll give you some examples. Number 4. Revision as an attempt to trivialize atrocity, right? You use revisionist tactics in order to trivialize atrocity. I just finished, as a matter of fact, I have it right. I finished reading probably about 2 or 3 months ago, With Intent to Destroy, Reflecting on Genocide. This book is, I would say maybe 60% of the book is about denialism, right? The process of denialism, how denial unfolds, what denial is with respect to genocide scholarship. I am a conflict resolutionist. I'm most interested in sort of grand violence, grand epistemic governmental political violence, which typically manifests in the form of genocide, but not only genocide. And part of these great atrocities is that while the atrocity is happening, you want to mask its occurrence. After the atrocity has happened, at a subsequent period in time, you want to deny the events that happened. And what this aspect of denial is an attempt to revise the historical facts. So the first thing is that revision can be used as an attempt to trivialize atrocities, right? It can be an attempt to trivialize right? It can be used to trivialize. So for example, you have the Holocaust as an event, right? You have the Holocaust as an event. It happened at a particular time, right? During a particular span of time, 12 or so years. It has its historical identification and its historical significance. And we know what that significance is, right? A lot of horrible acts happened as a consequence of the events leading up to the Holocaust. A lot of great acts happened after the Holocaust, right? League of Nations, United Nations, the ICC. All of these things happened as a consequence of the atrocities. Now, what ends up happening is that a period of time later, historians might want to implement this notion of revisionist history to deny, right? To deny or to trivialize the significance of the Holocaust, right? Well, really what it was ... Or you have to understand, and there's this rationalizing attempt to downplay the grandeur, the epic grandeur, the transcendental grandeur of the event. It was a horrific, it's ineffable. You can't even describe the event, is my argument. I did my entire dissertation research on this event, and I don't believe you can adequately describe. I know you can't adequately describe. You can have a list of all the facts. I didn't put facts up there. You can have a list of all the facts, certainly, right? You can know how many people died and in what ways they were tortured, in what ways scientists experimented on people, in what ways families were broken up, the destruction of population, the expansion of an army, the conquest, amount of guns, amount of artillery. You can talk about all of that. There can be a chronology of an index, a taxonomy of facts, certainly. This historical significance is a really horrific event, as an evil event, certainly. But there is a sense in which that meaning transcends, and I wrote on this, and I've published on this. I've written a dissertation and a book on this. That meaning transcends understanding. You can't you can't understand how epically evil it was. So we just give it the only word that we have, evil. It was bad. It was really, really bad. What ends up happening is the deniers come in and they use this revisionist history to downplay how bad that act was. And I'm not going to go into specifically in this point the various tactics and the various historians that attempted to downplay it. But you understand how revisionist history can be used in a negative sense, right? The event happens, it doesn't have to be the Holocaust, it can be a very, very tragic act, and what we attempt to do is deny or trivialize the significance of that act at some point later in time. That's one bad aspect. Okay? Next is revision as a form of repression. We might want to revise in order to repress some information, right? It might be the case that we recognize that there is a certain amount of information. There's a certain amount of information that happened on the timeline at some time t. At some other time t2, we recognize that this information is sensitive. There's a sensitivity to this information, and that this information could potentially affect me in the present, right? If that information leaks out that you know, the guns were illegally transported to Nicaragua. Oh my goodness, you know, that could be huge, right? That could have devastating effects for me. So I need to suppress that information in order to, I need to repress that information in order to secure myself at this current time, right? So what I end up doing is I attempt to suppress, right? I attempt to suppress some information in the past, and obviously I downplay I trivialize, you know, these concepts are not necessarily interchangeable, but they're multiple uses, right? Oh no, it's not that significant, or I attempt to hide it, I attempt to burn it, I attempt to get rid of whatever facts there are that can incriminate me. There's a great scene, and it just popped in my head, there's a great scene in one of my favorite movies of all time. Funny, on a quick side note, Keanu Reeves, not the greatest actor in the world, however, he's in all my favorite movies. The Matrix, Devil's Advocate, so shout out to Keanu Reeves. So Keanu Reeves in The Devil's Advocate, there's a scene where he sees what Lomax is doing. He sees all the papers being shredded, right? Because there's information in those documents that can incriminate me now, so I want to get rid of that information. You can think about it in the same sense. There's something in the past, whatever that thing might be, that can incriminate me, and I need to suppress that information. So what I do is I revise how that information is interpreted. Okay, so suppression. And then lastly, number 6, revision as an attempt to preserve identity. This is the point that McCarthy really focuses on in his text, in this section of the book. And what he says, and I'm not going to get into it now, but what he says is, with respect to Nazi Germany and the just horrendous stigma that it had on the German population as such, and the German people in particular, obviously subsequent generations of Germans want to cleanse themselves, cleanse is a loaded word, but cleanse themselves of the stigma with this sort of immediate association between Germany, German people, Nazis, right? It's like, oh, Germans, Nazis. It's like, I'm Jamaican, so Jamaican marijuana, right? You can't get away from it, right? Oh, you're Jamaican, oh, you smoke, you know, oh, Bob Marley. We can't escape it, right? And in that sense, the new generations of Germans, rightfully so, want to say, listen, we need to distance ourselves from that identity. I am a German, and I'm not, but I'm just saying hypothetically, I'm a German, and I'm a proud German, and I don't want to identify myself with the National Socialist Party, right? I'm not that. And this is a very, very tricky thing. We'll talk about a positive way to do this and a negative way to do this. But at this point, it's this attempt to preserve, right? You want to preserve your identity. So what you do, you want to preserve, in a way, your intentions are good, right? You want to preserve the fact that you're German in this example, because the example that's given is German population. You want to preserve your identity as a German, and you want to be proud in your identity as German. So what you do is you